Stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water. Exodus chapter 14, verse 16, the Exodus. In brief, passage, Exodus chapters 14 through 17. Theme, divine deliverance. Setting, 14th to 13th century BC, northeastern Egypt. Key figures. Moses, God's appointed leader of the Israelites, who follows God's instructions to lead them out of bondage. Aaron, Moses' brother, who assists him in guiding the Israelites out of Egypt. Miriam, sister to Moses and Aaron, later a prophetess. Pharaoh, ruler of the Egyptians, who chases after the Israelites despite having released them from slavery after the plagues of Egypt. Central to Judaism, the Exodus, from a Greek word meaning exit, narrative, is the account of the founding of the nation of Israel. The tale also features one of the most famous episodes in the Old Testament, Moses parting the Red Sea. Following a barrage of plagues sent by God, Pharaoh summons Moses and Aaron and tells them that their people can leave. The Israelites, more than 600,000 of them, hastily gather their belongings and make their way out of Egypt into the wilderness. They are at last free of bondage, but their troubles are not over. God leads the Israelites toward the promised land, manifesting himself as a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, in order to light their way and make the exit from Egypt as swift as possible. He leads the people southeast in the direction of the land he has promised to them. The Israelites, however, are confused by the directions they are given and complain to Moses, who consults God at every sign of trouble. Pharaoh's reaction. God then does something that is surprising. He hardens the heart of Pharaoh. Exodus chapter 14, verse 4, prompting the Egyptian ruler to decide to pursue the Israelites. This serves two purposes. It tests the faith of his chosen people by making the situation even more perilous, while at the same time defending them by luring the Egyptians into a trap. Pharaoh dispatches an army of chariot-borne soldiers, which catches up with the Israelites on the shore of the sea near the place called Pi-Hahiroth. Exodus chapter 14, verse 9. The Hebrew translation of Exodus calls the area Yam Suf, Sea of Reeds, whereas the Greek translation refers to it as Thalassa Erethra, the Red Sea. As the Israelites realize they are being trapped between the water and Pharaoh's army, they panic and cry out to Moses. Transformed by God, Moses has lost his former reluctance to lead. He calms his followers by telling them simply to be still and that God will deliver them. God then instructs Moses to raise his staff and stretch out his hand across the water. He assures him that the waters will part and the Israelites will be able to move on across dry land. He further explains Moses that he will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will follow the Israelites under the seabed. The repetition of this phrase underlines the dual purpose that God had in mind from the start. When God raises his staff, everything comes to pass just as God promised. The Israelites cross dry ground between two enormous walls of water, while God holds back the Egyptians back with his pillar of fire. Once the Israelites are safely across the river, God allows the Egyptians to give chase. When the army reaches the seabed, Moses lowers his arms, and the waters sweep over the Egyptian soldiers and drown them. This divine act is one of several instances in Exodus in which God demonstrates this supreme power. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die?" Exodus chapter 14, verse 11. The Red Sea. A 1,400-mile-long seawater inlet of the Indian Ocean, the Red Sea lies between Africa and Asia. At 16 to 18 miles wide at its narrowest point and about 165 feet deep at its shallowest, it would have been a significant hurdle for the Israelites to cross. The name Red Sea has two possible derivations. First, the word red was used in some Asiatic languages to denote the direction south, just as black was used for north and other colors for east and west. Alternatively, the name may derive from the presence of large plumes of cyanobacteria or saw sea dust, called Trichodesmium erythraeum, which turns reddish brown as it dies off. The ubiquity of this weed on the surface of the Red Sea may also explain the Hebrew name Yam Suf, Sea of Reeds. Although some scholars believe Yam Suf might refer to a reed-strewn freshwater lake that existed in ancient times on the site of the Suez Canal, it is also possible that Yam Suf refers to the same weed that turns the sea red. Song of the Sea. Once they have been safely delivered from Pharaoh's army, the Israelites celebrate by singing a song in worship of God. Known as the Song of the Sea, Exodus chapter 15, the hymn is led by Moses and his sister Miriam. Moses then leads the Israelites towards his old homeland of Midian and Sinai, where he is destined to receive God's commandments for their new nation. The Israelites' high spirits don't last long, and Moses is soon tested by his people once more. They complain again that they might have been better off as slaves than risking starvation in the wilderness. However, every time the Israelites complain, God provides. When people ask for more food, God rains a sticky bread-like substance from the sky. This is manna and becomes part of the Israelites' diet during their 40 years of wandering. When they complain of not having enough meat, God makes a flock of quail in their camp every day. For water, Moses instructs Moses to strike a rock with a staff from which fresh water gushes. This continued divine intervention saves the Israelites and shows the benevolence of God. Significance of the Exodus. The Exodus is at the very heart of Judaism, but its message of freedom has also inspired many non-Jewish groups, from early Protestant settlers fleeing persecution in post-Reformation Europe to 20th century African Americans striving for civil rights. There is little archaeological evidence to support the Exodus as historical fact, but the largely accepted wisdom is that the event occurred sometime around the mid-1300s BC, and that Moses himself wrote the book that records it. In Exodus chapter 34, verse 27, God tells Moses to write down these words, and Jesus, in Mark chapter 12, verse 26, quotes from the Exodus as the Book of Moses. God uses Moses as his instrument to rescue his chosen people, not just from slavery, but from a polytheistic society. The Exodus story shows God's power, his love for his people, and how he encourages and rewards trust and faith. Preceding events anticipate it, and subsequent events refer back to it. Matthew chapter 2, verse 15 in the New Testament alludes to Jesus' new Israel come out of Egypt. The Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. Miriam. After the crossing of the Red Sea, Miriam, an older sister of Aaron and Moses by 3 and 6 years respectively, leads the Israelite women in celebrating, shaking timbrels, tambourines, singing, and dancing. Chapter 15, verse 20. Referred to as a prophetess in this episode of Exodus, she plays a crucial role in Moses' life and is also mentioned in Numbers chapter 12, Numbers chapter 20, verse 1, Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 9, and Micah chapter 6, verse 4. When Pharaoh orders the murder of all the firstborn male Israelite children, it is Miriam who watches over Moses in the basket hidden in the reed beds of the Nile River. When Pharaoh's daughter discovers the baby, Miriam offers to find a nurse for him and secretly enlists the help of his mother and her own mother. Later in the Bible, however, Aaron and Miriam rebel against Moses. God punishes Miriam with leprosy, but then heals her after 7 days. True to her story, the name Miriam means either beloved or bitter.